He was a man who seemed to have it all. A respected doctor in his community, known for his sharp mind and steady hands. From the outside, his life looked perfect: a successful career, a loving family, a beautiful home. But beneath the surface, a quiet storm was brewing. Every morning, he'd wake up with a heavy feeling, a sense of dread he couldn't quite name. The demands of his job were relentless, the pressure immense. He felt like he was running a marathon with no finish line, slowly losing pieces of himself along the way. He was living, but he wasn't truly alive. One evening, while scrolling through articles online, searching for something, anything that might help, he stumbled upon a piece about the power of journaling. It sounded almost too simple, too cliché, 5 minutes a day. How could scribbling in a notebook possibly make a difference when his entire world felt like it was spinning out of control? He was skeptical, a man of science who believed in data and evidence, but he was also desperate, so he decided to try it. He bought a simple, plain notebook, nothing fancy, and a pen. That night, for the first time, he sat down and wrote for just 5 minutes. The results? They would change everything he thought he knew about himself, his life, and the very nature of happiness. The first few days were awkward. He stared at the blank page, his mind as empty as the paper. What was he supposed to write? Today I saw 20 patients. I ate a sandwich for lunch. It felt pointless. The thoughts in his head were a chaotic jumble of medical charts, patient anxieties, and a never-ending to-do list. He felt disconnected from his own feelings, as if they were behind a thick wall of glass. He could see them, but he couldn't touch them. The 5-minute timer would go off, and he'd feel a strange mix of relief and disappointment. He almost gave up. But something made him continue. Maybe it was the quiet ritual itself, the simple act of sitting down, just for him, with no distractions. Around the end of the first week, something shifted. Instead of just listing the day's events, he wrote, "I feel tired." It was a simple sentence, but it was the first time he had named the emotion, not just the circumstance. The next day, he wrote, "I am worried about the test results for the patient in room 302. He started noticing the small details. He wrote about the way the morning sun hit his kitchen counter, the taste of his first cup of coffee, the brief, genuine smile from a nurse in the hallway. Slowly, the journal became less of a chore and more of a sanctuary. It was a space where he could be completely honest, without judgment. He wrote about his frustrations, his fears of making a mistake, the immense weight of holding people's lives in his hands. He also wrote about the small victories, a difficult diagnosis he got right, a patient who thanked him with tears in their eyes, a moment of laughter with his kids. The journal was becoming a mirror, reflecting a side of himself he had long ignored. He started to see patterns in his own thoughts and feelings. He realized how often his stress was tied not to the events themselves, but to his perception of them. 1 month into his daily journaling practice, he had a particularly grueling day at the hospital. A young patient had taken a turn for the worse, and despite his team's best efforts, the outcome was not what they had hoped for. He came home carrying a heavy burden of guilt and sadness. In the past, he would have buried these feelings, maybe had an extra glass of wine, and tried to numb the pain. Instead, he opened his journal. He didn't just write about what happened, he poured his heart out onto the page. He wrote about his feeling of helplessness, his anger at the unfairness of it all, his deep sorrow for the family. As he wrote, something remarkable happened. The act of putting his emotions into words seemed to create a distance between him and the pain. It didn't erase the sadness, but it made it manageable. He could look at it, acknowledge it, and understand it, rather than being consumed by it. He realized his journaling wasn't just a record of his life. It was a tool for processing it. He started using it proactively. Before a difficult conversation with a patient's family, he'd spend 5 minutes writing down his intentions and preparing his mindset. After a stressful surgery, he'd take 5 minutes to decompress and let go of the tension. His family began to notice the change. He was more present at the dinner table, listening to his children's stories instead of mentally running through his patient list. He laughed more easily. His wife commented that the light had returned to his eyes. He felt it too. The constant, low-level anxiety that had been his companion for years was starting to fade. He was sleeping better, waking up feeling rested instead of exhausted. It wasn't that his job had gotten any easier or the pressure had disappeared. The world outside was the same, but his world inside was transforming. The biggest surprise came about 6 months in. He was reviewing his old entries, a habit he'd developed. Reading his first few pages was like looking at a stranger. He saw the disconnection, the exhaustion, the quiet desperation in his own words. Then he flipped to his more recent entries. They were filled with reflections, gratitude, and a newfound sense of clarity. He had written about a conversation with a junior doctor, where he had shared his own struggles with burnout and offered support. He had written about taking a spontaneous trip to the park with his family on a Tuesday afternoon, just because the weather was nice. He realized the journaling hadn't just helped him manage stress, it had reconnected him to his purpose. He had become a doctor to help people, but somewhere along the way, the paperwork and the pressure had buried that initial passion. By clearing away the mental clutter, he had rediscovered his why. His 5-minute daily habit had done more than just improve his mood. It had fundamentally changed his perspective on his life and his work. He started sharing his experience, tentatively at first, with colleagues who looked as weary as he once felt. He recommended the simple practice, a notebook, a pen, and 5 minutes a day. He told them it wasn't magic, but it was medicine for the soul. The man who had sought a cure for his own quiet desperation had found it not in a pill or a procedure, but on the blank pages of a simple notebook. And, in doing so, he became a better doctor, a better husband, a better father, and most importantly, he started to feel like himself again.